A young millionaire tied the knot with a poor waitress. But at the wedding, she revealed a secret that left everyone stunned. Ethan was born into a typical family living in a small town. From a young age, he dreamed of becoming wealthy and famous one day. His parents and older brothers mocked him. The family had never been well off. His father would say, "We're accustomed to hard work, not to tricking people, but being rich doesn't mean taking advantage of others or earning money dishonestly," the boy protested. "You're too naive, son," his mother replied. "You don't understand life yet." Ethan didn't know what to say. He was hurt that his parents didn't believe in him. But he didn't let that stop him. His dream continued to burn brightly within him. At night, when Ethan lay in bed, he would close his eyes and picture a large, spacious house with a pool and a shaded garden where he would one day live. The boy fantasized about the trips he could take once he started making good money. In school, Ethan was always among the top students because he had a goal and ambition. He diligently completed his homework and always aimed to learn more than what was taught in the school curriculum. He often stayed up late studying instead of going out to play soccer with his friends. His parents were always amazed by their son's determination, and when he announced that he was going to apply to a university in the capital, they were stunned. "Are you serious, Ethan? Do you really think you can manage that?" his mother asked anxiously. "I have no doubt I'll succeed," Ethan responded confidently. His mother just shook her head in disbelief. Everything unfolded exactly as Ethan had predicted. After finishing school, he was accepted into a prestigious university to study business technology. During his studies, Ethan actively participated in various team projects, competitions, and startup research, which allowed him to gain valuable experience and knowledge. He was never shy about approaching well-known businessmen who came to the university to give lectures, and he would always ask them questions. This approach helped him gain expert insights and understand the finer details of running a business. Additionally, he made useful connections and acquaintances. Many company owners were impressed by his ambition, youthful energy, and potential, so they offered him positions in their firms even before he graduated. Ethan's father, mother, and older brothers were astonished when he told them about these offers and advised him to accept one of them. However, as usual, Ethan had his own perspective on the situation. After graduating from university, he chose not to follow the conventional path. He didn't join any of the companies that had offered him a job. Instead, he decided to take some risks and start his own business. To do this, he delved into studying computer technology and chose to create an online school focused on programming, website creation, and financial management. During his studies, Ethan often won cash prizes when he placed first in competitions and contests. He gave part of the money to his parents and saved the rest for the future. Now, the young man involved several university friends in the project and invested all his savings into developing the online school. The team worked tirelessly, perfecting the product and preparing it for launch. When everything was ready, Ethan launched virtual advertisements. Initially, his offer didn't attract much attention, but thanks to the marketing strategy he had learned at university, his startup began to gain traction. Many people liked the idea of learning technology at their convenience without leaving home. As a result, the number of students at the school grew daily. A year after the launch, Ethan's online school became one of the most popular virtual platforms on the market. This attracted significant attention from major investors who offered the young man substantial investments for further development of the project with new opportunities. Ethan was able to expand the team and start developing additional courses, which were launched within a few months. Furthermore, he managed to secure collaborations with leading global experts, greatly increasing the platform's popularity. Soon, the young man earned his first million thanks to these accomplishments. Ethan gained recognition within the business community. He was invited as a speaker to various prestigious conferences and forums where he shared his experiences and inspired other entrepreneurs. After one such event, Ethan felt hungry and decided to grab lunch at a cozy restaurant next to the business center. When he entered, he was welcomed by a warm atmosphere. Soft lighting, artwork on the walls, gentle music, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. At that time, He was the only customer in the restaurant. Ethan chose a table by a large stained glass window, sat down, and began browsing the menu. A few minutes later, a waitress approached him. A beautiful young woman with large brown eyes and a friendly smile. She wore a light floral perfume that was pleasantly subtle. Her name tag on the crisp white shirt read Sofia Cortez. "Good afternoon," the young woman greeted him warmly. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" Ethan felt an unexpected quickening of his heartbeat. There was something inexplicably captivating about the woman standing before him, and he suddenly wanted to know more about her. "Good afternoon, Sophia. I'll have a cappuccino and your signature seafood pasta," he responded. "Of course, your order will be ready soon," Sophia nodded and walked away from his table. About 10 minutes later, she returned, placing the dish and drink before him with a cheerful tone. "Here's your seafood pasta and cappuccino. Enjoy your meal." Ethan thanked her and began to eat. When he finished, he noticed that Sophia was at the bar, engrossed in a book. Catching his glance, she quickly closed it and, placing it aside, hurried over to his table. "Did you enjoy everything?" she asked. Ethan smiled and nodded. "Yes, thank you. Could you bring me the bill, please?" Sophia soon returned, holding a small leather folder, which she placed on the table before him, then stepped back. Ethan settled the bill, leaving a generous tip, and as he stood to leave, he glanced back at Sophia. She was again by the bar with her book, but this time, when she noticed him, she lifted her head and smiled. "Thank you for dining with us," she said. "We hope to see you again." Ethan slowed his pace, feeling a sudden urge to know more. "Excuse my curiosity, but what are you reading?" he asked. "It's a documentary novel about travels, based on the author's real experiences," Sophia replied, her eyes lighting up. "He writes about places, traditions, and cultures that are completely new to me." Her response intrigued Ethan. "That sounds fascinating. I love traveling too," he said, hesitating for a moment as he thought that, given her job and youthful age, Sophia might not have had the chance to travel and likely only read about faraway places. He also wondered if she recognized him, as his face often appeared on business magazine covers, though she might not be interested in the corporate world. Ethan preferred to remain incognito, always wary that women might be drawn to him because of his wealth. "Which countries would you like to visit?" he asked as casually as possible. "Oh, I've always dreamed of visiting New Zealand. My father used to tell me a lot about that country," Sophia answered, though her expression suddenly grew somber. Ethan figured that with her salary, it would take a long time to save for such a trip. He had visited New Zealand once and had been enchanted by its green landscapes, but he chose not to mention that. "That's a wonderful dream," he said instead. Sophia nodded, adding, "They filmed The Hobbit there. It was one of my favorite books as a child." "So you've loved reading since you were little?" Ethan asked. Sophia smiled and nodded. "Yes, my father actually inspired my love for reading. He worked a lot, but whenever he got home early, he would always read to me before bed. He introduced me to the world's most famous stories and fairy tales." Ethan found her story endearing. He wanted to keep talking, but he didn't want to overstay his welcome. Politely, he said goodbye and left the restaurant, carrying the image of Sophia in his mind. He thought about her throughout the evening and resolved to return to the restaurant the next day, just to see her again. But to his disappointment, Sophia wasn't there. She had the day off. He dined and returned home, determined to try again the following day. This time, fortune smiled on him. When he entered the restaurant, Sophia greeted him with her sweet smile. Ethan chose to visit during the day, hoping there would be fewer customers. His plan worked. The place was nearly empty, and Sophia was once again sitting with a book. Ethan took the same seat as before, and Sophia came over to take his order. This time, Ethan asked her to recommend something tasty, and she suggested the spinach pie. "I trust your judgment," Ethan smiled, "and please bring me a cappuccino, just like last time." Sophia nodded and walked away. Ethan took a few deep breaths to steady his racing heart, pretending to be completely absorbed in the view outside. In reality, he was desperately trying to think of a topic for further conversation with Sophia. When she returned with his order, he asked if she had finished reading the travel book. Sophia nodded, saying she had read it in one sitting. "What are you reading now?" Ethan inquired, fiddling with the napkin on the table. Oh, it's another interesting travelogue, this time about a trip to Japan. I had no idea before that the Japanese are so clean. They even wash their streets with shampoo, Ethan chuckled. Sophia's face then took on a slightly concerned look. Your food will get cold if we keep chatting like this, she remarked. I don't want to interrupt your meal. Ethan nodded, then said, Promise me you'll give me your phone number so we can meet and talk more when you're off work. Sophia smiled and agreed. Sure, she said, as she pulled out a pencil and a small notebook from her pocket. Quickly, she scribbled her number on a blank page, tore it out, and handed it to Ethan. He nodded, slipping the note into his pocket. After finishing his meal, Ethan paid the bill, once again leaving Sophia a generous tip and bid her a polite farewell. That evening, he sent her a text, suggesting they meet over the weekend. Sophia mentioned that she hadn't been out in nature for a while, so Ethan proposed they meet at Central City Park, a place that felt more like a forest with its towering trees and a sizable pond in the center where swans and ducks glided across the water. Sophia said it was her favorite park and gladly accepted Ethan's invitation for Sunday. As evening approached, they met at the park's entrance and leisurely strolled along its inviting pathways. As they walked, their conversation flowed easily, and they gradually discovered more about each other. Sophia wasn't just a sweet and attractive woman, she was also intelligent, well-read, and ambitious, with dreams as big as Ethan's. He found himself relishing every moment spent with her. Do you believe in happy coincidences, Sophia? Ethan asked suddenly. It depends on what you're referring to, she replied, a hint of curiosity in her voice. I'm talking about how we met. I'm really glad I chose to have lunch at your restaurant that day, Ethan explained. Sophia blushed slightly and nodded. Yes, that chance meeting led to a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed talking with you too. So have I, Ethan admitted, and I'd like to see you again. Sophia's smile broadened at his words. Why not? She replied with a casual shrug. Her response bolstered Ethan's confidence. They continued their walk through the park, discussing various topics, until Sophia finally asked what Ethan did for a living. The young man realized that she still didn't know he was a successful businessman and millionaire. I run my own business, was all he said. Ethan wanted to keep their world filled with lighthearted conversations about travel, books, movies, and other mutual interests, rather than discussing work. For their next outing, Ethan wanted to take Sophia somewhere special, a place she had never visited before. He spent a considerable amount of time researching online recommendations and even sought advice from friends and acquaintances. Eventually, he was directed to a unique cinema called Clouds, housed in an old yet charming building. The idea intrigued Ethan, and he decided to surprise Sophia with a visit there. He didn't tell her where they were going, only that it was a surprise. Do you trust me, Sophia? He asked playfully over the phone. The girl's affirmative response was all the assurance he needed. I promise this evening will be unforgettable, Ethan added with confidence. That evening, he picked her up after work. He waited for a few minutes before Sophia emerged from the restaurant, and when she did, Ethan almost didn't recognize her. She was dressed in a long silver gown adorned with shimmering sequins, her hair styled in soft waves cascading to one side, secured with a glittering hairpin. Dangling butterfly-shaped earrings added to her elegance. Sophia looked absolutely stunning, but it was her eyes, sparkling like stars framed by long lashes, that truly captivated Ethan. For a moment, he was speechless. He helped her into the car, then took a deep breath as he got in himself. You look incredible, absolutely breathtaking, like an angel who's just descended from heaven, he finally said. Sophia blushed and thanked him. So where are we going? She asked playfully. I hope it's not a football match. Ethan chuckled. No, not tonight. We're headed somewhere special, somewhere magical, just like your outfit deserves. With that, he started the car and drove them to the secret location. He had heard that the Cloud Cinema was an extraordinary place, offering visitors a unique experience that felt like a journey through time. Ethan had pre-booked the tickets and arranged a small surprise for Sophia with the theater's staff. He was eagerly anticipating an unforgettable evening with her. The cinema was located in the heart of the city, its whimsical architecture catching the eye with tall arched windows and marble columns that added a touch of elegance. As they entered, Sophia was immediately struck by the theater's enchanting atmosphere. Neon signs illuminated the space, old movie posters adorned the walls, and the cozy vintage seats gave visitors the sensation of stepping back into the mid-20th century. The lobby was spacious, yet had a slightly mysterious air, thanks to the dim pinkish lighting. The floors were covered in black and white mosaic tiles, and the walls were decorated with mirrors and ornate frames, along with portraits of famous actors and classic film stills. One wall displayed a large, handwritten schedule of movie showings, while antique ticket vending machines nearby added a nostalgic touch to the cinema. "This place is amazing. I've always wanted to visit somewhere like this," Sophia said to Ethan, her eyes wide with wonder. "I'm glad you're enjoying it," he replied, smiling. As Sophia continued to take in the surroundings, Ethan gently reminded her that the movie would be starting soon. They made their way into the theater and settled into plush seats facing a grand screen. The lights dimmed, and the opening credits began to roll. The film, shot in black and white, was both humorous and romantic. During the screening, Ethan softly took Sophia's hand and interlaced his fingers with hers. She smiled warmly at him in the dim light. The entire experience felt magical, and neither of them wanted the movie to end. The love story unfolding on the screen touched Sophia deeply. When the film concluded and the lights came back on, Ethan suggested they explore the rest of the cinema. "Shall we check out the other rooms? I've heard there's a small museum here with fascinating exhibits on the history of cinema," he said. Sophia eagerly agreed. The Cloud Cinema featured several halls, each uniquely decorated to represent a different era in film history. The hall that housed the Cinema Museum was adorned with vintage lamps and golden patterns on the walls, while the ceiling resembled a starry sky with cotton clouds suspended on delicate strings. As they wandered through the cinema, Sophia suddenly noticed a poster featuring her own image in one of the halls. The poster was black and white, and she looked like a classic movie star from a bygone era. Sophia froze, astonished. "How is this even possible?" she wondered aloud. "This was my surprise for you," Ethan admitted with a shy smile. "I took one of your photos from social media, created a retro version of it, and arranged with the cinema's staff to have it displayed here. I hope you like it." Feeling a mix of excitement and embarrassment, he waited for her reaction. "It's incredible," Sophia exclaimed before leaning in to kiss Ethan on the cheek. He blushed and grinned, feeling a surge of happiness. They then headed up to the rooftop, where they could sit under the open sky and gaze at the stars, hand in hand. Together, they admired the twinkling city lights for what felt like hours. The evening at the cinema became a cherished memory for both, filled with magic and atmosphere. As time went on, Ethan and Sophia continued to spend time together, growing closer and more connected with each passing day. They engaged in deep conversations, explored new places, and simply enjoyed each other's presence. Ethan gradually realized that Sophia had become more than just a friend. She was someone he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. One evening, as they walked through the park with the stars shining brightly above, Ethan felt it was the perfect moment to share his feelings with Sophia. He led her to a bench by the fountain, and they sat down together. "Sophia," he began, his voice soft yet steady, "over the time we've spent together, I've come to understand something important." He paused briefly, and Sophia looked at him expectantly, waiting for him to continue. The fountain murmured softly in the background, its droplets glimmering under the lamplight. "You've become such an important part of my life. I've never met anyone like you. You're like a ray of light, beautiful, kind, and genuine. I love you." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as she listened. "Ethan, I love you too. You've brought so much brightness and happiness into my life," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. The young couple embraced, sharing in the warmth and joy of their mutual feelings. They remained on the bench for a long time, content just to be near each other, enveloped in the moment. Eventually, Ethan leaned in and kissed Sophia. Their kiss was tender and lingering, and in that instant, Ethan knew he wanted it to last forever. Afterward, he walked Sophia home, promising to message her as soon as he got back. The excitement from the evening kept him awake for hours, unable to sleep. As dawn broke outside his window, Ethan made a firm decision. He wanted to propose to Sophia, but he knew that this moment needed to be special. something she would never forget. He muttered to himself as he finally drifted off to sleep, already beginning to plan the details in his mind. The next day, Ethan set to work on his plan. He needed to find the perfect place to say those cherished words to Sophia and to choose the right ring for her. After much thought, Ethan decided to propose in the park where they had first walked together. It was a place that held deep significance for them both, symbolizing the bond they had formed. Knowing Sophia's love for travel, he decided to create a little miracle for her. He arranged for a hot air balloon ride so they could soar into the sky together, and he would propose to her among the clouds. The idea thrilled him, and he could hardly believe it was really going to happen. The following day, Ethan visited a jeweler and ordered a beautiful ring with a pink gemstone shaped like a heart. The craftsman assured him it would be ready in a week. Ethan returned home, his heart pounding with anticipation, and began the countdown. He was nervous, but he hoped that everything would go perfectly. The day finally came when Ethan invited Sophia for a stroll, mentioning that he had planned a special evening for them. When they arrived at their beloved park, Sophia spotted a bright red-hot air balloon in the distance and suggested they take a closer look. As they neared the balloon, a mustached older man standing in the basket waved them over and warmly invited them to join him for a ride. Sophia was stunned. "Is he really going to take us up in the air?" she asked in disbelief. Ethan just smiled and nodded, gently taking her hand and leading her to the balloon. As they climbed into the basket, it began to rise slowly. Sophia watched with a mix of wonder and nervousness as the ground gradually fell away beneath them. Meanwhile, Ethan's focus was on the velvet box containing the ring in his pocket. Once they were high enough, Ethan turned to face her. "Sophia, there's something I need to say," he began. "Then say it," she replied with a smile, her eyes locked on his, eager to hear what he had to say. "You mean the world to me. You've brought so much joy and meaning into my life. I can't imagine my future without you in it." With those words, Ethan pulled out the box and opened it. "Sophia, will you marry me?" he asked. Sophia was caught off guard, tears of happiness welling up in her eyes. "Yes, Ethan, of course I will," she answered with a trembling voice, not a moment's hesitation in her response. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced tightly. The couple was on cloud nine, both literally and figuratively. The very next day, Ethan and Sophia began planning their wedding. They both wanted the day to be unforgettable, filled with special moments they would cherish forever. They carefully planned every detail to create the perfect celebration. The first step was choosing a venue. Sophia and Ethan decided on an outdoor ceremony surrounded by nature. They found a beautiful restaurant with a large veranda overlooking a serene lake. It was the ideal spot to create the romantic atmosphere they envisioned. Sophia decided to make the invitations herself. She selected pastel-colored paper and adorned each card with floral patterns. She added dried lily-of-the-valley flowers to each invitation, symbolizing love and devotion. "Dear friends, we would be honored to have you at our wedding," Sophia wrote in her elegant handwriting. "These are beautiful," Ethan remarked when he saw her handiwork. Sophia blushed and hugged him. "I want everything to be perfect," she said softly. Sophia didn't have many friends in the city, so most of the guests would be Ethan's friends. "I'm finally going to meet your parents," Ethan said, smiling. "And I'll meet yours," Sophia replied, her eyes twinkling. They had talked about this for a long time, but since both sets of parents lived far away, the wedding would be the occasion that brought them all together. Sophia took her closest friends to help her choose a wedding dress. After visiting several boutiques, she finally selected a stunning silk gown with a lace back and a long train. She also bought a pair of elegant, long white gloves. Ethan, on the other hand, opted for a classic black tuxedo with a crisp white shirt and a bow tie, looking both stylish and festive. For the veranda where the ceremony would take place, Sophia and Ethan chose soft pastel tones. They decorated the space with pink, white, and green floral arches and strung garlands of pink and gold lights to create a truly magical atmosphere. The wedding banquet menu featured a variety of exquisite dishes, and the highlight of the evening would be a grand wedding cake with several tiers topped with figurines of the bride and groom. Ethan took special care in selecting the music for the celebration. He hired a band to play beautiful romantic ballads during the evening, and later, a DJ would take over to get the younger crowd dancing. On the day of the wedding, everything went off without a hitch. Sophia looked radiant in her white dress with a veil and beautifully styled hair, while Ethan stood at the altar, nervous but overjoyed. As Ethan and Sophia exchanged vows, the priest pronounced them husband and wife. Ethan kissed his new bride as his parents stepped forward to congratulate them. Unfortunately, Sophia's parents missed this part of the ceremony. Their flight had been delayed due to bad weather. Sophia's mother called, her voice almost in tears as she explained. Sophia did her best to comfort her, assuring her that she and Ethan were eagerly awaiting their arrival. The guests gathered on the veranda, enjoying the beautiful weather, the stunning views, and the lively conversations. The newlyweds were showered with congratulations and spent time catching up with old friends and close relatives. Everyone shared in the joy of the day, celebrating the love between Sophia and Ethan, who seemed like the perfect couple. The party was in full swing when Sophia's parents finally arrived on the veranda. Sophia rushed over to greet them, hugging her mom and dad tightly before excitedly recounting the ring exchange ceremony. Her parents were overjoyed for their daughter, and her mother even shed a few tears of happiness. "I want you to meet Ethan," Sophia said, leading her parents over to the group where Ethan was chatting with his friends. As they drew near, Ethan noticed Sophia and offered her a warm smile. Excusing himself from his friends, he walked over to his bride. "Ethan, my parents finally made it," Sophia said excitedly, introducing her father and mother. Ethan greeted them with polite enthusiasm. "It's wonderful to meet you," he added. But to his surprise, Sophia's parents remained silent. The girls stared at them, bewildered, and noticed how their faces had turned ghostly pale. Her father even clutched his chest, his hand trembling. Ethan was at a loss, unable to grasp what was happening. Sophia quickly apologized and guided her parents to a table with refreshments. Once they were settled in comfortable chairs, Sophia sat beside them, a sense of dread creeping in. "Dad, what's going on?" Sophia asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Why did you react like that when you saw Ethan?" Her parents exchanged uneasy glances. "Sweetheart, listen," her father began after clearing his throat, his voice filled with resolve. "This man isn't right for you." Sophia was stunned. "What?" she asked, struggling to comprehend. "But why? What's wrong with him?" "We don't know the kind of person he really is," her mother replied gravely. "But we can tell you one thing. You need to stay away from him." Sophia's head spun. "But he's my husband," she protested, her voice shaking, "and I love him." She looked helplessly between her parents, but they avoided her gaze. "Please, just explain," Sophia pleaded, unable to hold back any longer. "This man ruined our lives," her father suddenly blurted out, his expression hardening as he stared directly into his daughter's eyes, his voice seething with anger. "But how?" Sophia managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. Her father then revealed the entire truth about Ethan. Sophia's face went pale and tears brimmed in her eyes. At that moment, the master of ceremonies took the microphone and invited the newlyweds to the stage to give their speech. Ethan approached the table where Sophia and her parents sat and gently took her hand. "Shall we go?" he asked, his eyes filled with concern. Ethan could sense something was wrong, but had no idea what it was. "Yes, of course," Sophia replied weakly. Hand in hand, the couple walked onto the stage, greeted by warm applause from the guests. Ethan took the microphone first and began to recount how he first saw Sophia in a restaurant. "This incredible woman made my heart race the moment I laid eyes on her," he said, gazing at Sophia with deep affection. However, Sophia was lost in her own thoughts, barely registering his words. Ethan, sensing her distraction, grew increasingly worried but continued speaking. When he finished, he handed the microphone to Sophia. She accepted it without meeting his gaze, her hand as cold as ice. "First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here to celebrate our wedding," Sophia began. The guests responded with more applause. Despite everything, Ethan continued to look at Sophia with love and support, completely unaware of what she was about to reveal. "What Ethan said is true. When he first saw me, I was working as a waitress in a restaurant," she continued. "But it wasn't always that way." The groom's guests began whispering in surprise. "In fact, until I was 22, I never had to work because..." Sophia paused to steady her breath before finally confessing, "I was the daughter of a millionaire." A collective gasp filled the room. Ethan stared at his wife in disbelief as the guests waited in stunned silence. "Yes, it's true," Sophia confirmed. "My father owned a chain of computer technology schools, which successfully educated children and adults across the capital. I had everything I could ever want: the best clothes, access to the trendiest places in the city, and the freedom to travel. I didn't need to work, so I spent my time as I pleased. But one day, a young entrepreneur launched an online school that offered the same education as my father's schools, but with the convenience of learning from home. This platform became so popular that my father's business went under. He closed down his schools, leaving us in debt, and I took a job as a waitress to make ends meet. That's my story, and I felt it was important to share it with all of you." With those words, Sophia handed the microphone back to the host, and apologizing to the room, she walked toward the exit, tears streaming down her face. Ethan was left reeling by what he had just heard. He wanted to run after his wife, but it was as though he was frozen in place. The guests felt an overwhelming sense of discomfort. What had once seemed like a perfect day had unraveled in mere moments. Ethan finally snapped out of his stupor, and without acknowledging anyone, dashed to the exit. He found Sophia by the lake, sitting on a bench, weeping uncontrollably. Ethan approached her and sat down, gently taking her hand. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" he asked softly. Sophia didn't pull her hand away, but it remained cold in his grasp. "I didn't even realize it was you," she admitted. "My parents recognized you today. They remembered your face from magazines and told me. I've always considered you my enemy, and now it turns out you're my husband." Ethan was at a loss for words. A wave of dizziness swept over him, and he feared losing Sophia. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea that my business had hurt anyone like this." "Of course, you didn't know," Sophia replied, her voice flat and tinged with sadness. "But can this really drive us apart?" Ethan asked, trying to catch her gaze. "I love you and want to be with you, my love," Ethan pleaded. Sophia sobbed softly. "I'm not sure, Ethan. I need some time alone to think everything over." Ethan simply nodded in response. He could sense that something deep was shifting within his wife, and she needed space to process it. Sophia and her parents called a taxi and left. Ethan remained behind to see the guests off. He looked devastated and lost, with the guests offering sympathetic looks, though they could do nothing more. Before departing, each guest wished him a peaceful resolution to the situation. Somehow, Ethan managed to make it through the evening. Everything felt like a haze. When he finally got home, he collapsed onto the bed and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, his first impulse was to write to Sophia, but he remembered her words and held back. However, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He was restless, unsure of what to do next. "We should be on a plane right now, heading to New Zealand for a month-long trip," Ethan thought bitterly. He couldn't understand why everything had taken such a drastic turn. "Is our story destined for a sad ending?" he wondered in despair. Sophia didn't reach out that day, nor the next. Ethan also took no steps to contact her. After a week of mutual silence, he couldn't bear it any longer and sent her a bouquet of flowers. In the accompanying note, he wrote that he loved her and was waiting for her. Sophia didn't reply. A month passed, and Ethan still couldn't find any solace from the sadness and longing he felt for Sophia. He tried to return to his daily routine, but it was a struggle. Each day was filled with nostalgia for the happiness he had lost. Ethan would have given anything to relive those joyful moments he had shared with Sophia. But Sophia remained silent. Ethan threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself with tasks and projects. He often stayed late at his computer, but thoughts of Sophia never left his mind. "How is she? Does she miss me as much as I miss her?" he wondered constantly. Another couple of months went by, and despite his efforts to return to normalcy, Ethan felt a deep emptiness and loneliness. He realized that his love for Sophia was too strong to simply move on. Every morning and every night, Ethan prayed for a second chance, and eventually, fate answered him. One evening, Ethan decided to take a walk in the park where he and Sophia had spent so much time together. He strolled along the familiar paths, memories of their happy moments flooding back, when suddenly he saw her. Sophia was sitting on the very bench where they had shared their first kiss, lost in thought. "Hello," Ethan said softly as he approached. Sophia started and looked up, her heart aching with both tenderness and pain. "Hello," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "May I sit down?" "Of course," Sophia nodded. Ethan sat beside her, and for a long time they simply gazed at each other, realizing just how much they had missed one another. "I didn't expect to see you here," Sophia finally broke the silence. "Did you hope to?" Ethan asked gently. Sophia nodded again. They began talking, and though their conversation started out cautious and tense, they gradually began to open up. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," Ethan confessed. "I missed you every single day we were apart." Sophia sniffled. "I missed you too, Ethan," she whispered softly. Ethan took her hand. "Let's try again. We can face all the challenges together. I'm ready to fight for our love." Sophia looked into his eyes. "I'm ready to try again too. We can start fresh and leave the past behind." They embraced tightly, and as Ethan kissed Sophia, it felt as if they had returned to the beginning. "This time, I won't let anything come between us," Ethan resolved silently. This moment marked the start of a new chapter in their lives. Ethan knew that to achieve true understanding with Sophia, he needed to speak with her father and address the issues between them. He asked Sophia for her father's phone number and suggested they meet to talk. That weekend, Ethan and Sophia traveled to the town where her parents now lived. As the train sped past fields of blooming sunflowers, Ethan felt a sense of calm wash over him. Most of their worries were now behind them, and beside Ethan was his beloved Sophia, who once again gazed at him with love and tenderness. Ethan gently held her hand and closed his eyes. "I wish it could always be like this," he thought. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, and they both drifted off to sleep, lulled by the rhythmic sound of the train wheels. By evening, they reached their destination and stepped off the train together. Sophia's parents were already there waiting for them. They rushed to embrace their daughter, whom they hadn't seen in months. Although they still regarded Ethan with a sense of caution and mistrust, this didn't faze him. He was determined to prove to Sophia's parents that he was a respectable, honest man who was truly worthy of their daughter. They all climbed into the old family car and headed to her parents' home. The mansion where Sophia's parents lived was an older building, but it was quite spacious. With 2 floors, the young couple settled into a large room with a wide balcony on the top floor. After unpacking, they made their way downstairs to the bright living room, where a lunch table had already been set by Sophia's parents. "Mom loves to cook," Sophia admitted to Ethan, "and she's as skilled as a professional chef." "I have no doubt about that," Ethan replied, making Sophia's mother blush slightly. The 4 of them enjoyed a pleasant meal together, and afterward the women headed to the kitchen to prepare coffee and serve chocolate cake. Ethan realized it was the right moment to have an important conversation with Sophia's father. "Mr. Cortez, I'd like to discuss what happened," he said. The older man nodded, fully understanding what Ethan wanted to talk about, and invited him to step into the garden. He led Ethan to a lovely white gazebo and pointed to one of the wooden benches. Mr. Cortez took a seat across from Ethan, ready to listen carefully. Gathering his thoughts, Ethan began to speak. "Mr. Cortez, I understand that my actions created competition between our businesses, and what happened as a result brought pain and disrupted your life. But I assure you, I never intended to harm anyone. Had I known the consequences, I would have handled things differently. Unfortunately, we can't go back and change the past. However, I ask you not to judge me solely based on what happened. Yes, my decisions impacted not just you, but your family, and most importantly, your daughter. But I love her more than anything, and my only desire is to make her happy. Please trust me and don't hold a grudge against me. Give me a chance to show you the person I truly am." Mr. Cortez listened intently to Ethan's words, but didn't respond right away. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "If you both truly love each other, I won't stand in the way of your relationship. Besides, in the world of business, you aren't to blame. You pursued your goals and advanced your business, and that's admirable." Ethan nodded in appreciation. "Thank you for your understanding." Mr. Cortez extended his hand to Ethan. "Let's leave the past behind us and see how our relationship develops moving forward." Ethan shook his hand and smiled. Agreed, he replied. They returned to the living room, where the women were already waiting with a table full of desserts, including the chocolate cake. Ethan sat down beside Sophia and felt a deep sense of contentment. It seemed like everything was finally falling into place, and his worries began to fade away. Sophia and Ethan's visit marked a significant step toward mending and rebuilding a relationship of mutual respect and friendship between their families. This sense of renewal was evident to everyone as Sophia and Ethan took a stroll through the garden after lunch. Sophia leaned against her husband and thanked him for everything he had done for her. Ethan responded with a smile and a kiss. They walked through the garden for a long time, basking in a sense of harmony and joy. From that day on, the young couple embarked on a new and happy chapter of their lives together. They made a vow to support one another in all their endeavors and to build a future hand in hand. Their love had only grown stronger from the challenges they had faced together. Every day was filled with the joy and happiness of being reunited. Ethan and Sophia's story is a testament to the power of true love, showing that it can overcome any obstacle. That is the end of a beautiful story. If you have enjoyed this tale of love, please support us by liking it, leaving a comment, and subscribing our channel if you have not already. Thank you so much.